fear is one of the most powerful forces in our lives. It shapes our choices, limits our actions, and sometimes even defines the direction of our entire existence. And yet, most of us rarely look fear in the eye. We sense it, we feel it, but we avoid confronting it. We run from it, hide behind excuses, and sometimes even disguise it as caution or logic. But here's the truth: fear grows stronger in the dark. It thrives when it is unspoken, unnamed, and unchallenged. The first step toward ending fear is not to run faster, not to fight harder, but to pause and name it. Because when you name your fear, you strip it of its mystery. You expose it to the light of awareness, and suddenly, what once felt like a monster begins to reveal its shape. And once it has shape, you realize it is not infinite. It is not unmanageable. It is something you can work with. Think about it. The fear of failure is not the same as the fear of rejection. The fear of loss is not the same as the fear of the unknown. But when we leave fear unnamed, it becomes this overwhelming cloud, suffocating us without clarity. The moment you say, "I am afraid of being judged," or "I am afraid of trying and failing," you have taken the first step toward dismantling its power. Because now you are no longer wrestling with a shadow. You are engaging with something concrete. Psychologists often say, name it to tame it. And there is deep wisdom in this. When we remain vague about our fears, we remain victims of them. But naming fear gives us perspective. It gives us language, and language gives us power. Suddenly, instead of saying, "I am anxious," you can say, "I am afraid of disappointing others." Do you see the difference? One is a fog, the other is a clear picture, and only with clarity can we begin to move forward. I have met so many people who carry fear silently, as though admitting it would make them weaker. But the opposite is true. Denying fear makes it stronger. Acknowledging fear makes you braver. When you dare to name what frightens you, you are already standing taller than the fear itself. Because naming fear requires honesty, and honesty requires courage. And let us not forget, fear is not always an enemy. Fear has a role. It alerts us to danger. It sharpens our instincts. It makes us cautious where caution is needed. But when fear goes unnamed, it spills beyond its purpose. It stops being a guardian and becomes a jailer. You may begin to fear failure so much that you never try. You may fear heartbreak so much that you never love. You may fear change so much that you stay stuck in places that no longer serve you. And that, my friends, is the silent tragedy of an unnamed fear. It robs you not only of what you fear losing, but also of what you could gain. So how do we begin to name our fears? With honesty. By sitting with ourselves in those quiet, uncomfortable moments and asking, what am I really afraid of? Not what I tell others, not what looks noble on the outside, but the raw truth inside. Maybe the truth is, I'm afraid I'm not enough. Maybe it's, I'm afraid people will leave if they see my flaws. Or maybe, I'm afraid to try because success will change me in ways I don't understand. These truths can be hard to admit, but they are the beginning of freedom. Because once you have named your fear, you can begin to challenge it. You can ask, is this fear protecting me, or is it limiting me? Is it guiding me wisely, or is it imprisoning me? And more often than not, you will find that fear is exaggerating its story. It tells you the worst will happen, but rarely does it show you the possibility of growth, the chance of success, the lessons in failure. Fear narrates only one side of the story, the darkest side. And by naming it, you remind yourself that there is always another side. Philosophically, fear is an illusion of permanence. It convinces us that pain will last forever, that rejection will define us forever, that failure will crush us forever. But life has never worked that way. Everything passes. Pain heals, rejection teaches, failure transforms. When you name your fear, you begin to see it not as an eternal chain, but as a temporary hurdle. And that shift in perspective can change everything. I want you to reflect on this. What is the fear you haven't named yet? Maybe it's the reason you haven't started a dream project. Maybe it's the reason you keep people at arm's length. Maybe it's the reason you silence your own voice. Whatever it is, I promise you this, the act of naming it will not make it worse. It will make you freer. Because freedom begins not when fear disappears, but when it loses its invisibility. So the ending of fear does not begin with grand gestures. It begins with small acts of truth. Saying to yourself, this is what I am afraid of. Saying it out loud, writing it down, admitting it in your heart. And once you do, you will notice something remarkable. The fear that felt so heavy, so unbearable, begins to feel lighter. Because the unknown is always heavier than the known. And the moment you know your fear, you can begin to rise above it. And maybe, just maybe, you will come to see fear not as a wall that blocks you, but as a doorway that challenges you to walk through. Because beyond that doorway is growth, beyond it is freedom, beyond it is the life you were meant to live. So name your fear, call it out, give it shape. And once you do, you'll realize that fear is not as large as it once appeared. It was never the mountain you thought it was. It was only the shadow of the mountain. And shadows lose their power the moment you turn toward the light. Fear once named does not simply vanish. It lingers, it tests you. It asks if you truly meant the courage you claimed. But this is where the deeper work begins. Transforming fear into something greater. Turning it from a chain into a key. The ending of fear is not just about reducing its grip. It is about discovering the freedom it has been hiding from you all along. We often think of fear as the opposite of freedom. Fear restricts. It shrinks our choices. It silences our voices. It locks us inside invisible cages. And yet, if we look closely, fear can also become the very path to liberation. Because every time you confront a fear, every time you step into the very thing you thought you could not bear, something extraordinary happens. The walls fall away. The prison door swings open, and what remains is a freedom you never knew you were capable of holding. Think of the first time you faced a fear. Perhaps it was standing on a stage, of speaking when your voice was trembling. Perhaps it was choosing honesty when a lie would have been easier. Perhaps it was saying goodbye when you thought you could not survive the loss. Do you remember what happened afterward? You didn't just overcome a moment. You expanded the borders of your life. You realized that the world didn't end, that you were stronger than you imagined, that fear's story was only half the truth. That realization is freedom. Psychologists call this expanding the comfort zone, but it is more than that. It is reclaiming your life from the illusions fear created. Because fear loves to exaggerate. It tells you, if you try, you will fail. If you speak, they will laugh. If you love, you will be abandoned. And when you believe those whispers, you hand over your freedom. But when you challenge them, when you say, I will try anyway, I will speak anyway, I will love anyway, you take that freedom back. Philosophically, fear and freedom are intimately linked. Freedom is not the absence of fear. Freedom is the choice to act despite fear. Imagine a bird in a cage. The bird may be safe, protected, untouched by danger. But is it free? No. Freedom begins the moment the cage door opens, and stepping out requires risk. Freedom always carries risk. The risk of falling, the risk of failing, the risk of being hurt. But to stay behind bars simply because as risk exists is to trade your soul for comfort. And belief in yourself, true belief, does not bargain that way. It chooses flight even with trembling wings. This is why fear can become a teacher. It points directly to the places where freedom is waiting. If you fear rejection, perhaps freedom lies in owning your voice fully. If you fear failure, perhaps freedom lies in pursuing dreams that matter more than success itself. If you fear loss, perhaps freedom lies in loving without conditions, knowing that impermanence does not diminish value but deepens it. Fear shows us the doorway, courage walks us through it. And there is something else to understand if fear does not disappear forever. It reappears at every new edge of growth. But instead of seeing this as weakness, see it as proof that you are alive, that you are stretching, that you are daring. If fear arises, it means you are standing at the threshold of freedom once again. And each time you cross that threshold, your life expands. So what does transformation look like in practice? It looks like reframing the way you see fear. Instead of asking, what if this fear destroys me? Ask, what freedom lies on the other side of this fear? That single shift can change everything. Fear then stops being a wall that blocks your way and becomes a compass pointing to where you must go. It no longer imprisons you, it guides you. And when you follow where it points, you step into freedom that is not temporary, but lasting. Because it is earned. The beauty of this transformation is that it ripples outward. When you face your fears, you don't just free yourself, you inspire others to do the same. Courage is contagious. When you stand tall, even while trembling, you silently tell others, it's possible. And often, that is all someone needs. To see possibility embodied in another human being. But let me remind you, freedom is not given. It is chosen. Every day, in small and big ways, you decide whether to stay in fear's cage or to step into freedom. You decide whether to let fear dictate your story or to write your own. And the act of choosing may feel heavy in the moment, but the reward is immeasurable, a life that is truly yours, unshackled, authentic, alive. So the next time you feel fear rising, pause. Do not turn away. Do not numb it. Do not disguise it. Ask yourself instead, what freedom is this fear protecting me from? And then dare to take even one step toward it. Because freedom is not reached in a single leap. It is built step by step, fear by fear, choice by choice. And one day when you look back, you will see that the ending of fear was never about erasing it. It was about transforming it, about turning the very thing that once bound you into the force that set you free. So do not run from fear. Walk through it. Because on the other side of fear, there is freedom. And that freedom is waiting for you to claim it.